everything is going to hell down here in Texas.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is your boy, Big Bad Bob, with you. Coming in hot on this ass microphone. Hold on a second. Alright, maybe that'll be a little better. Anyway, what's up? This is episode 222 of the Lone Gunman podcast. And today we're going to be talking about Oswald's voyage to Europe via the SS Marion Lykes. We will also be discussing the antics of the FBI in light of the events of the assassination and what was going on behind the scenes. We all know that the FBI wants to always paint a picture, you know, of this pristine organization that can do no wrong. So it's interesting to see what they were self-disciplining themselves behind the scenes. Well, we'll get there, I promise. First off, if you'd like to follow along and interact with the show, Twitter, at the Lone Gunman 7. Boom, that's it. You want to get into a troll fest, head over to YouTube and search for the Lone Gunman podcast channel. Make sure you like and subscribe and get notifications when new videos drop. There, I said it. Also, a lot of people are asking, Roger. The theme music is done by the band Shepherd on Fire. The intro track is called Unwanted, and the outro track is called Black River. And once again, thank you, Roger and Shepherd on Fire, for allowing me to use your awesome music as themes for the show. It's much appreciated and makes the show sound fucking awesome. So there's that. All right, so let's get into Oswald's trip. Okay, so Oswald is in the Marine Corps, right? He is granted an early discharge to take care of his mother, who had a candy jar fall on her face. Now, I'm not sure if this is a legit excuse or what is going on here. You know, apparently that's the excuse. Marguerite never refuted it. Marguerite said a lot of shit throughout the years until she died, but she never refuted the candy jar in the face story. So, for what it's worth. So, upon returning home to take care of his busted up mother, he, within 3 days, he stays there about 3 days. I guess he helps her out. He pulls her nostrils back out of her brain. And within 3 days, he is hopping on a freighter heading for Europe. Okay? A freighter heading for Europe called the SS Marion Lykes. Lykes. Now, the SS Marion Lykes was not a love boat type cruise ship, you know, in any form or fashion. It was more of a cargo ship. In fact, there were only 4 passengers other than straight up cargo and freight on this ship making their way to Europe. There was, of course, Lee Harvey Oswald. There was a fellow who we're going to be talking about here today by the name of Billy Joe Lord. Oh, Lord. Billy Joe Lord. And then there was also some kind of military major and his wife, okay, on board. So, to take you through the story, on June the 26th, 1964, there was an affidavit executed for the President's Commission on the Assassination of President John F. Kennedy, in the form of a sworn affidavit. I, Billy Joe Lord, being duly sworn, say, I am an airman 3rd class in the United States Air Force. I am in the 340th Bomb Wing Combat Defense Squadron at Bergstrom Air Force Base in Texas. I am 22 years old, and my parents live in Midland, Texas. After graduating from Midland High School in 1959, with the financial assistance of my parents, I made plans to continue my education in France. August 1959, I made an application of a passport, and on or about September 15th, 1959, I departed Midland, Texas via train for New Orleans, Louisiana, arriving there at about September 17th, 1959. I spent the next 3 days touring the city of New Orleans and making several trips to the ticket office of the Lykes lines. The cost of passage aboard the SS Marion Lykes amounted to slightly more than $200. Okay. Let's pause there for a second. So it's about $200 for a trip to Europe on the SS Marion Lykes. Now, Oswald had just gotten out of the Marine Corps. He likely would have had his money saved up from the time that he was in the Corps. So this is not out of the realm of possibility that, okay, Oswald paid his way, you know? This is not post-return where he's hopping from job to job with Marine and the kid and not making any money, scraping by. So, okay, we can go with that. Please continue, Billy Joe. All right. I registered and stayed in the LaSalle Hotel on Canal Street, which was near the city library. I visited the library several times during the stay in the city. During this period, I did not know Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, I thought long and hard about reading this in the Billy Joe Lord voice, but I decided against it. I likely couldn't make it through. So that's on me. I'm just not feeling up to the task today. So pardon me, it'll just be written or read in the old Rob Clark accent, Big Bad Bob accent, so whatever you want to call it. Yeah, goddamn, it's here, Billy Joe Lord. Nah, I can't do that. On September the 20th, 1959, I boarded the freighter SS Marion Lykes at New Orleans. Upon boarding the ship, I was shown to my room, and when I got there, Lee Harvey Oswald was already there and moving in. We were to share this room. I had never before seen nor heard of Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald and I shared this cabin for the duration of the trip to France, which was 14 days long, folks. 14 days long. So that's 2 weeks. Yeah. My damn Billy Joe Lord here was stuck in a cabin with Lee Harvey Oswald on this long ass trip over to the Europe. I'm going to go study in France, get me an education, you know what I'm saying? So 2 weeks is a long time to be stuck in a tiny cabin on a giant ship with somebody you don't know. Now, fortunately, they happen to have similar backgrounds. They're both former military. They're both about the same age. So, you would think that they would talk. All right, let's continue here. In our first conversation, Oswald said he was recently discharged from the Marines and that he had worked in some technical field while in the Marines. He indicated that he was somewhat bitter about the fact that his mother had to work in a drugstore in Fort Worth and was having a, quote, difficult time. He also said he would probably return to the United States to work. He gave no indication of his ultimate destination, although he said he was going to travel he was going to travel somewhere and in Europe and possibly attend school in Switzerland if he had sufficient funds. Also in this first conversation, we discussed religion. I do not know why we discussed religion, except that possibly he noticed that I had a Bible. Oswald maintained that he could not see how I could believe in God in view of the fact that science had disproved the existence of God and that there was only matter. After the first day, I hardly conversed with Oswald at all. Oswald was not outgoing, and neither was I. We just were not very friendly individuals. Besides Oswald and myself, there were 2 other passengers aboard the ship. They were a retired U.S. Army colonel and his wife, Colonel and Mrs. George B. Church, Jr. All 4 of the passengers generally ate their meals together in the ship's officers' mess. Oswald ate most of his meals with us. I do not recall Colonel Church and his wife associating very much with Lee Harvey Oswald. I shared a closet with Oswald, but I did not notice anything out of the ordinary among Oswald's possessions. He did show me either his military identification card or his passport. I can't remember which. Oswald did not indicate that he might defect to Russia at all. To the best of my knowledge, Oswald did not receive any correspondence or communications while aboard the ship, nor did he associate with any of the ship's crew. Oswald never mentioned any contacts or friends in Europe. He appeared to be a normal, healthy individual, mentally alert, but extremely cynical in his general attitude. On October the 5th, 1959, our ship arrived in France, and I disembarked from the ship, and I never saw or heard from him again. It's my recollection that he departed from the ship after my departure. I had written my mother about all the passengers, and when Oswald defected, she sent me a newspaper clipping about it. Oswald spent a great deal of his time during the trip on the deck. I do not recall him doing any reading. I do recall, however, that there was a radio speaker which received programs from Europe, and that Oswald and the colonel seemed to understand a little bit of the foreign language that came over the speaker. I thought it was German, but I'm not sure. I attended the Institute of French Studies at the city of Tours, province Touraine, France, from October 59 to February 62, intermittently while attending courses at the University of Poitiers, Tours, France, and at the Supreme Could have that wrong. Something Sorbonne, University of Paris, France. I returned to the United States um, aboard the something ship Liberty in June of 1960. I went to France again in February of 1961 for further education and returned to the United States in February of 1962. Signed this 26th day of June 1964. Billy Joe Lord. Good Lord. All right, so there's what Billy Joe had to say to the Warren Commission. That's his affidavit, folks. Billy Joe. On December 2nd, 1963, Billy Joe Lord was interviewed by the FBI. Apparently, they tracked him down pretty quick. And this is what their report says. Billy Joe Lord, U.S. Air Force, assigned to 862nd Combat Defense Squadron, Minot Air Force Base, rural Minot, North Dakota, advised as follows. He entered the United States Air Force on September 28, 62 at Amarillo, Texas, and has been assigned to the Minot Air Force Base in rural Minot since December 16th, 1962. Okay, so at the time he was on the boat with Lee Harvey Oswald, he was not military yet. Apparently, he joined after he received his education abroad. In the spring of 1959, he graduated from the Midland High School, Midland, Texas. In the fall of 59, traveled to France, where he intended to enter a language school to obtain a major in language and literature. He first met Lee Harvey Oswald when he departed from New Orleans the latter part of September 59 aboard the SS Marion Lykes, a freighter. Oswald occupied the same cabin as Lord en route to France. He recalled observing Oswald's passport and visa and noting the name Lee Harvey Oswald on the passport. However, he was unable to recall at this time Oswald's destination as reflected on the visa attached to the passport. He did recall that the freighter stopped at only two ports, Les Palais France and a port in England, and that Oswald did not disembark in France. In addition to himself and Oswald, there were only two other passengers on the freighter, namely a retired U.S. Army major and his wife, names unrecalled, who he believed were from the state of Florida. Okay. So, during his FBI interview, he could not remember their names, but 7 months later, in his affidavit to the Warren Commission, he does. Okay. Who he believed were from the state of Florida. He vaguely recalled they were traveling to either Ireland or Scotland. During the entire trip, he actually had very little conversation with Oswald, as Oswald was a very cynical, surly, unfriendly type of individual who obviously did not desire to associate or engage in conversations with his fellow passengers. On the first day of his trip, Oswald did engage in a very limited amount of conversation. He recalled Oswald told him that he intended to vacation in Europe, with no specific area in Europe being mentioned. He further recalled Oswald saying that he might possibly attend some unknown school in Switzerland. Oswald at no time indicated that he had any intention of going to Russia. He never had any reason to believe Oswald could be an agent of any foreign government or that he was inclined towards communism. He advised Oswald never discussed his background with him other than to state that he was from New Orleans and was just recently discharged from the Marines. Oswald stated that his mother lived in Fort Worth and was employed in a drugstore in Fort Worth. Oswald seemed very bitter about the economic conditions of his mother. Oswald, however, did not comment on the economic conditions in the United States or discuss any political views. He recalled that although Oswald never specifically stated he was an atheist, he gave this impression, stating on one occasion that only matter existed and everything came from matter. Oswald appeared to be somewhat of an intellect, having above average intelligence, but did not appear to do any reading aboard the ship. Oswald did not appear to be a violent or a fanatic individual. The first time he actually knew that Oswald had traveled to Russia was when he was in receipt of a newspaper clipping from his mother, Mrs. Leela Lord, from Midland, Texas, in which it was reported that Lee Harvey Oswald, a 20-year-old ex-Marine from Fort Worth, had denounced his American citizenship and had turned in his American passport and requested Russian citizenship. He said he believed the article appeared in the Fort Worth newspaper during November 1959. His mother had recalled the name of Oswald from a letter he, Lord, had written to his mother upon arriving in France, mentioning to her that Oswald had been his roommate on his voyage over yonder. All right, it's pretty cut and dry stuff, right? You know, nothing to see here, nothing too crazy. And then comes the year 1977, when old Billy Joe Lord got the bright idea of writing a letter to America's most beloved president, Mr. Jimmy Carter. Yeah. Dear Mr. President, I have refrained from troubling you with the contents of this letter as long as I possibly could. But I have finally decided that a personal letter to you is, in the end, in your interest and in the country's interest. I'm simply transcribing notes which I set down about 2 weeks ago and which concern and must concern any leader of this country. I, sir, was Lee Harvey Oswald's roommate, cabin mate on the SS Marion Lykes, which sailed from New Orleans to France in the September of October 1959. I have recently been the subject of surveillance, harassment, pressure tactics, and possibly terror tactics. First, in September, when I was teaching in Japan, someone broke into my house, rifled through my papers, but stole nothing. I returned to the United States shortly thereafter, and back in Texas, I was suddenly and improbably, sorry, I lost my place here. Suddenly and improbably the subject of a blitz of contacts by telephone from persons wanting to know urgently and insistently what I knew or remembered about Oswald. No one had asked me anything about Oswald since the time of the Warren Commission, 12 years ago. The blitz of calls came out of the blue. It was highly improbable, and after the break-in, I was suspicious. I stalled these people who represented two major national publications. During this period of non-cooperation, I received another surprise, another first for me. Two Iranian gentlemen, bald, mustachioed, pointy shoes, appeared at my door. My mother's house was up for sale, and they were prospective buyers. A small ad had been placed in the paper. The Iranians strode through the rooms in a very cursory, almost arrogant manner, paced off the front yard, and drove away. The sale of the house had been discussed on the phone among family. A small ad had been placed. Only one other couple showed up to look at the house. Neither I nor my mother, 63, had ever received a visit from Iranian gentlemen before. One of the parties, which has blitzed me with phone calls trying to persuade me to tell them what I know about Oswald, is engaged in a very costly project which allows them to locate, interview, monitor, and influence every single available person who ever knew Lee Harvey Oswald, and this just in advance of the new governmental investigation by the House Select Committee on Assassinations. I finally consented not to grant an interview, but to allow the publication's representative to explain their project to me in person. After a lunch with this person, I was told that if I refused even to meet with him, pressure was in the offing through two Midland men, Mr. Jim Allison, publisher of the ultra-conservative Reported Telegram, my employer out of necessity and for the moment, and Mr. George Bush Jr. The researcher said he had asked an acquaintance, a Mr. Bemis, chairman of the Republican Party in Virginia and owner of a string of hotels in that state, for help in persuading me to tell what I know about Oswald. After this revelation, and when I still refused to be interviewed, the publication's leg man made an effort to purchase my knowledge about Oswald. I refused, and he left. Shortly thereafter, my mother discovered that her telephone had been bugged. The casing around the dialing apparatus had been pulled out about half-inch. It was so obvious as to be grotesque. But we cannot doubt that someone entered the house at a time when I was at work and my mother was away. She returned to the house, however, at an unaccustomed time. I have been in anguish for weeks, Mr. President, trying my best to laugh at my apprehensions and to see these events as fortuitous ones. Experience, common sense, and logic persuade me otherwise. So I've been compelled to react to all this in the form of a statement, and it may shed some light on the reasons for the intrusions lately into my life. Speaking as the man who spent more than 2 weeks in the same ship's cabin with Lee Oswald at the time of his 1959, quote, defection, and speaking as a man who have been the subject of the above described tactics of cowards, I offer the following considerations to the American people and to people everywhere. Number one, it is CIA and FBI relations with Lee Oswald, which have been covered up since November 22nd, 1963. It is the CIA and the FBI which have concealed and destroyed evidence of their relationship with Oswald prior to November 22nd, 63. It is the CIA which has from the beginning fabricated or distorted certain Cuba-Oswald relations and certain Cuba-JFK relations as a smokescreen and decoy to conceal the CIA-Oswald relationship. I can testify, and others can testify, that the CIA did not conduct a real investigation of the so-called defector Oswald in '59. The CIA has long been concerned about witnesses who can testify to this oversight on their part. Number 5, they did not conduct a real investigation because Mr. Oswald was a bogus defector. Number 6, the CIA is concerned, lest the knowledge that Oswald was a fake defector in 1959, linking him to the CIA, and also linking him with the CIA on November 22nd, 63. But there is an impressive body of evidence that CIA used and abused Oswald as late as November 63. Number 7, it is the CIA Oswald relation to the FBI Oswald relation which have necessitated the 13-year cover-up. Number 8, a necessary conclusion is that CIA and FBI elements in 63 are suspect in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Number 9, the assassination of John Kennedy has every appearance of having been a first American coup d'etat. Mr. President, as a man, a father, and a concerned citizen, I plead that you would act energetically also if you were in my shoes. I believe that you should be aware of the fact that one of your fellow citizens does not feel that he, his wife, and 3 children, and his mother are safe in Midland, Texas. I conclude, Mr. President, by assuring you that I have the most enormous respect for you and the most hope-inspiring indications of your goodwill, as of your rare ability to lead this nation. Without flattery, you are quite simply the political light of this period in history. May God be with you. I apologize for the crude and doubtless offensive tone of this letter. I hope you understand. Sincerely, Bill Lord. No more Billy Joe, folks. Just Bill. Funnily, we also have the envelope. That's addressed to President of the United States, Executive Office of the President, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, 2500. Airmail, Special Delivery Jones. Now, apparently, Mr. Lord is tired of being harassed, in his view, and has some certain thoughts about the FBI and the CIA at this point in 1977. And I can't say that he's very far off base. You know, he believes that the fake defecting program was part of a CIA project. He believes the FBI had ties to Oswald. And he believes the CIA was doing things with Cuba and wanted to cover up that fact. So I can't say that he was too far off base. He was definitely a man ahead of his time with his knowledge of just a regular citizen with grand delusions. The sitting president in 1977 gave it two damns about him, which prompted this FBI response some 3 weeks later from then director of the FBI, Clarence Kelly, who was nominated by Richard Nixon in 1973. He was the first not acting director. He was the first director after J. Edgar Hoover's death. He served until from 1973 to February of 78, so almost 5 years. He was a lifelong FBI guy, retired from the FBI in 1961, went on to become chief of police in Kansas City, Missouri. Very involved in police associations, received a Hoover Gold Medal for outstanding job service in 1970. This guy was definitely a Hoover stalwart. So we have this letter, a memorandum from the director of the FBI, Clarence Kelly, to the special agent in charge of El Paso, February 24th, 1977. Enclosed are two copies of a letter, an envelope received from the complainant Bill Lord. Also enclosed are two copies of an FD 302 reflecting an interview with a Billy Joe Lord on 11/30/63, and two copies of an affidavit of a Billy Joe Lord as it appears in the Warren Commission report. And we've read from both of those, folks. El Paso Division is requested to contact Billy Joe Lord, acknowledge his letter, and obtain full details regarding any additional information he wishes to provide regarding the allegations set forth in his letter of February 2nd, 1977. Bureau indices revealed that a Billy Joe Lord was in fact a cabin mate of Lee Harvey Oswald during a 2-week ocean voyage from New Orleans to Europe, which took place in 1959. During the course of your interview with the complainant, ensure that he is advised that any fears he may have for his personal safety should be referred to the local police and not the President of the United States nor the FBI. If a review of El Paso indices should preclude interviewing the complainant, set forth your recommendations for not interviewing him in an appropriate communication. However, if the complainant is interviewed, SULHM the results within 21 days. Note, the complainant in his letter of 2277 indicates that he was a cabin mate of Lee Harvey Oswald. In 1959, the complainant was interviewed by our Minneapolis division in November 63 regarding said voyage, and the complainant additionally filed an affidavit with the Warren Commission. At no time did the complainant mention any of the allegations specifically pointed out 1 through 9 as set forth in his letter of 2277. This instructs El Paso to interview the complainant regarding any additional information he may have and to SULHM the results. So, they are to go talk to Billy Joe Lord. I guess nicely explain to him to stop writing letters to the President of the United States and throwing out wild accusations about the CIA and the FBI. And then if he's concerned at all about his personal safety, that he should contact his local police department and not the FBI or the President. Thank you very much. Have a great day, Billy Joe Lord. In your 15 minutes of fame, go fuck yourself. I just find it so hard to believe that, of the people that spent all this time with Lee Harvey Oswald, he'd never talked to him. Even when you're the only other motherfucker on a passenger or on a ship bound for Europe, a 2-week-long trip, you're sleeping in the same room with him every night. Your underwear is folded next to his underwear in the closet for 2 weeks straight. That you never talk about anything meaningful. I find that so hard to believe. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. All right, next up, set the table a little bit about the notorious FBI. Came across this. Some newspaper articles from New Orleans, Times-Picayune, sent to Dan Hardway on the U.S. House Select Committee on Assassinations. Dear Dan, enclosed are 2 newspaper articles which might interest you in light of Lee Harvey Oswald's activities in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans during the summer of '63. Please pass them on to any members of the staff who might be interested in them. Presently, I'm preparing a memorandum on Oswald and the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, which I hope to complete before I return to school in mid-January. I will certainly send you a copy when it's finished. Best of luck in the coming year. Sincerely, Mark Allen. So, the first one we have here from November 30th, 77, New Orleans Times-Picayune, an article by Kenneth Weiss entitled FBI in New Orleans set up a phony right-wing group to discredit the Klan. The New Orleans office of the FBI waged an extensive dirty tricks campaign against Louisiana units of the Ku Klux Klan during the 1960s in an effort to disrupt and demoralize the organization, according to newly released government files. At one point, the FBI set up a completely fictitious right-wing organization to discredit the KKK leadership and lured Klan members to join it. The New Orleans FBI office also suggested, but apparently never fully implemented, a detailed plan to harass leftist and anti-war student groups at college campuses in New Orleans and elsewhere in Louisiana. The documents reveal a wide network of FBI sources and key informants on Louisiana campuses who kept the government informed in detail on activities at Tulane, University of New Orleans, Xavier, Grambling, and elsewhere. The FBI operations were part of a national, long-term campaign of disruption and harassment of groups the agency considered subversive. Targets included the Klan, the Communist Party, so-called New Left organizations, and black extremist organizations. Details of the operation, called COINTELPRO, short for Counterintelligence Program, were released by the agency in response to a request under the FOIA Act More than 52,000 pages of previously declassified FBI files on the operation were made public. The documents, many heavily censored before being released, reveal in unprecedented detail FBI operations during the 15-year harassment program that was ordered discontinued in 1971, including use of the press and media contacts to convey the message the FBI wanted disseminated. For example, the documents indicate that efforts to discredit the Ku Klux Klan included assisting WWL-TV in the production of a documentary on the organization. The assistance was in the form of information given to the television station by the agency on a confidential basis that would emphasize the Klan's violent and unlawful activities, according to the documents. In another incident, the FBI considered distributing copies of an article that appeared in the Times-Picayune, which urged a crackdown on radical student groups. However, the documents are silent on what, if any, role the FBI had in getting the newspaper to initially publish the article. The New Orleans FBI office's Dirty Tricks campaign against the Klan included formation of a fictitious right-wing organization called the National Committee for Domestic Tranquility, or otherwise known as the NCDT, which issued a newsletter and personal correspondence to Klan members in an attempt to discredit Robert Shelton, the Imperial Wizard of the United Klans of America. It is the objective of the Bureau to create the impression that within the invisible empire exists the semblance of an organization which seeks to criticize Klan leadership. The phony organization operated from a Dayton, Ohio post office box, had a fictitious executive director who wrote to the address of known Klan members, and even opened a regional office in Alabama. As part of the Dirty Tricks campaign, the FBI sent tourist literature from the D.C. Chamber of Commerce to Klan members. The mailing was, quote, intended to further instill a fear in these Klansmen. They would be called to testify before the House Committee on Un-American Activities, according to the documents. The mailings for Klan members appears to have been successful in removing the veil of secrecy, which historically is supposed to surround the Klan. So, I'm reading you this so you get the idea of the lengths that the FBI would go to with their COINTELPRO operations to discredit and diminish and ultimately disband certain groups. And then there's this also, another newspaper article from the Washington Post on November the 22nd, 1977, exactly 14 years to the day after the assassination, by John Jacobs, a staff writer, entitled FBI Proposed Using Prostitutes to Shame Castro Backers. Shortly after the unsuccessful Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba in April of 1961, the FBI began a campaign to infiltrate pro-Castro groups in the United States and publicly discredit their leaders by such means as setting them up with prostitutes, newly released FBI documents have revealed. The anti-Castro campaign was part of the FBI's massive counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, to neutralize and disrupt domestic groups and individuals known to be critical of American policies. COINTEL documents released yesterday under a Freedom of Information Act request show that in June of 1961, J. Edgar Hoover approved establishing COINTEL programs in Cuban Field in an attempt to disillusion current members of such pro-Castro groups as July 26 movement and the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. The documents do not mention Lee Harvey Oswald by name. However, he claimed membership in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee and said he had opened a New Orleans branch. Shortly after November 22nd, 1963, the group disclaimed Oswald as a member. The Warren Commission later concluded that he had sought and been granted membership in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in May of 1963. The documents reveal a systematic pattern of disruption similar to COINTELPRO operations against such groups as the Socialist Workers' Party and the Black Panther Party. The New York office of the FBI, which originated the program, sought to create and foster distrust and an antagonism among the officers, and also recommended using city and state laws such as fire, health, travel, and tax regulations to obstruct these groups. An August 8, 1961 memo from the New York office to the FBI director described confidential sources setting up dates with leaders of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. The New York office will make the necessary arrangements with local police, the memo said, to possibly have blank picked up on local charges in the event he places himself in a compromising position through his association with professional prostitutes. If that didn't work, the memo said the Bureau would consider giving the prostitutes names to the local vice squad, along with the instruction to, quote, discreetly indicate that blank was the source of the information regarding the arrest. In either event, the memo concluded that the New York office is of the opinion that valuable ramifications might result to the benefit of the Bureau among the officials of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee through the embarrassment brought upon them. To compromise the leadership of the July 26 movement, the Bureau wrote a phony letter to the Movimiento Revolucionario in Havana, accusing a key leader in the New York group of embezzling movement funds. The letter suggested a total reorganization of the executive board, blah, blah, blah. Deleted is nothing more than a counter-revolutionary worm, a draft of the phony letter said, and his attitude has destroyed the foundations of the movement. But there is still time to try him and let him serve as an example to those who make trouble for the revolution. So you can see that even as early as 1961, the FBI was trying to discredit various pro-Castro groups, including the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, and has been alleged on this show before. It appears to be exactly what they were setting Oswald up to do concerning the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Now, let's get back to what the FBI was doing concerning Oswald and its various contacts over the years with Oswald. So in June 26, 1962, in Fort Worth, Agent John Fain and Burnett Tom Carter interviewed Lee Harvey Oswald, the first interview by the FBI of Oswald upon his return from the USSR. Oswald agreed to contact the FBI should he be contacted by Soviet intelligence. 2 weeks later, in Dallas, James Hosty checks the records of INS for background information of Marina Oswald on the request of Agent Fain. 1 month later in Fort Worth, John Fain. Determination of Oswald's employment. Alert Oswald to possible Soviet interest in him. Evaluation if Oswald constituted a security risk to the U.S. Hosty keeps Marina Oswald case. Not Lee Oswald's case. Marina Oswald's case in inactive pending status for 6 months from the period of July 62 to March of 63. March 4, 63. Hosty determines Oswald and his wife have moved from Fort Worth to Elsbeth Street in Dallas. This ends the 6-month pending status of the case, and this starts Hostie's efforts to investigate Marina on the basis that the FBI conducts an investigation of immigrants on a selective basis, and Marina was then selected. A week later in Dallas, Hostie determines from Elsbeth Street landlady that the Oswalds had been evicted a week earlier, on March the 3rd. Postal authorities reveal Oswald's new address is 214 Neely Street. A couple days later, Hostie verifies the Neely Street address. Hostie then checked Oswald's files and finds a letter from the New York FBI office advising Oswald was on the mailing list of the New York paper Daily Worker. March 25th, 63. Hostie sends a request to FBI headquarters to reopen the Lee Oswald case. Mid-May 63, Hostie learns that the Oswalds have left their Neely Street address. June of 63. Hostie receives a communication dated April 21st, 63 from New Orleans. FBI advising a confidential informant reports that Oswald has been in contact with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New York, at which time Oswald said he had passed out pamphlets for the FPCC. June 17th in Dallas, Hostie receives a communication from New Orleans, FBI advising Oswald was in New Orleans and requesting information on him. August 10th, New Orleans, John Quigley. Interview conducted at Oswald's request to speak to an FBI agent following his arrest for disturbing the peace while distributing FPCC pamphlets. 3 weeks later, October 3rd, Dallas, Hostie receives a communication from New Orleans advising that the Oswalds have left the New Orleans area. 3 weeks later, October 25th, Dallas, Hostie receives communication from New Orleans, FBI advising him Oswald had visited the Soviet embassy in Mexico City. Huh. Interesting that they knew that early. October 29th, Hostie, Dallas, receives communication from New Orleans FBI advising that Oswald's new address is 2515 West 5th Street, Irving, Texas. Also, same day, Hostie makes a pretext call to Dorothy Roberts of 2519 West 5th Street and determines that the 2515 address is the residence of Ruth Payne, with whom Marina lives. So you got Hostie knocking on the neighbor's door asking about this. Yeah, that's not going to start a shit show in the neighborhood. November 1st, Dallas, Hostie interviews Ruth Payne, who admits that Marina lives with her, but not Lee. Payne informs Hostie Oswald works at the Dallas, Texas book depository. Hostie meets Marina for the first time, leaves his name and phone number with Ruth Payne. 3 days later, Dallas, Hostie makes a pretext call to the book depository and confirms the 2515 West 5th Street address. Sends request to New Orleans office to make Dallas office of origin for Oswald case. So no wonder Oswald's getting pissed off. You got people going to the neighbors. You got the FBI calling his place of work asking about him, wanting to verify an address. I mean, come on, dude. 1 day later, Dallas, Hostie. Hostie and Wilson learned from Payne that Oswald had visited family. Payne did not know where Oswald lived in Dallas. November 22nd, 63, Hostie and Bookout. Interview conducted after Oswald was taken into custody following the shooting of JFK. Oswald exhibits great hostility towards the FBI men, especially Hostie, who Oswald said that he's heard about before. I bet he did if that dirty, nasty rumor is true about Posty raping Marina. Interesting. All right. So, when all this stuff went down with the assassination and Lee Harvey Oswald, and, you know, I just told you what the FBI did with it, with his information. So, in December of 1963, in connection with Bureau investigations concerning Lee Harvey Oswald and/or the assassination of President Kennedy, 17 Bureau employees, 5 field investigative agents, 1 field supervisor, 3 special agents in charge, 4 FBI headquarters supervisors, 2 FBI headquarters section chiefs, 1 inspector, and 1 assistant director of the FBI were disciplined in December of '63 for shortcomings in connection with the investigation of Oswald prior to the assassination. The disciplinary action taken was as follows. Now, here's what happens, folks, when you make the FBI look like fucking idiots. This is how you get got by J. Edgar Hoover. And it don't matter who you are, from the field agent all the way up to an assistant director of the FBI. He came down on him. You do not make the FBI look bad in the eyes of the public. Ever. Period. End of discussion, folks. And of course, none of this was made public at the time. So here we go. Number 1, a special agent in Dallas who had investigative responsibility for the Oswald case was censured and placed on probation for inadequate investigation, failure to interview Oswald's wife until after the assassination, delayed reporting, failure to place Oswald on the security index, and for holding investigation in abeyance after being in the receipt of information that Oswald had been in contact with the Soviet embassy in Mexico City. And they named this guy, and I think we all know who he is, Special Agent James Hosty, folks. Now you may be asking yourself, what does censured mean? Okay, it really doesn't mean much. The definition of censured is to express severe disapproval of someone or something, especially in a formal statement. So basically, they got written up and it's going in their file. Okay, which is never a good thing. So when you hear the word censured moving forward, you know what that means. But poor Hosty, man. So he got censured. He got placed on probation. Number 2, the field supervisor in Dallas with supervisory responsibility for this matter was censured and placed on probation as well for failing to ensure that the case was more fully investigated and reported, and for not placing Oswald on the security index, and for concurring with decision to hold investigation in abeyance. Now, there's another big word, abeyance. What does that mean? It means a state of temporary disuse or suspension, which basically means they're not doing shit about it when they should be. Basically is what that means. Number 3, a special agent in Dallas was censured for failing to have the Oswald case reopened after being informed that Oswald subscribed to The Worker, an East Coast communist newspaper. Pretty sure that's Fane. A lot of these names are not unredacted, if you will, on this page. Number 4, a special agent in New York was censured for failing to promptly disseminate fair play for Cuba information to Dallas concerning Oswald. Number 5, another special agent in New York was censured for failing to ensure that the fair play for Cuba information concerning Oswald was more promptly disseminated to Dallas. Number 6, a special agent in New Orleans was censured for delayed reporting and failing to have Oswald placed on the security index. 7 and 8, 2 special agents in charge who were assigned to Dallas during periods covering the Oswald investigation were censured for their overall responsibility in this matter. Number 9 is totally blacked out. I can read a little bit of it. It says the special agent in charge in the New Orleans office was censured for failing to delay in reporting this matter and for failing to put Oswald on the security index. Number 10, an FBI headquarters supervisor was censured and placed on probation for failing to instruct the field to conduct background investigation concerning Oswald upon his return from Russia, failing to have Oswald's wife interviewed, failing to put Oswald on a security index, and for not reopening the Bureau file to follow on this matter. Another FBI headquarters supervisor was censured and placed on probation for failing to take action on a teletype advising that Oswald had been in contact with the Soviet embassy in Mexico City, failing to completely review the file until after the assassination, failing to instruct Field to press more vigorously after obtaining knowledge of contact with Soviet embassy Mexico, and for failure to have Oswald placed on the security index. 12. Another FBI headquarters supervisor was censured for failure to place Oswald on the security index in spite of considerable fair play for Cuba committee activity and previous Soviet defection background. 13. An FBI headquarters supervisor was censured for delay in handling a cablegram from Mexico City and for not putting Oswald on the security index. 14, 15, 16, and 17, 2 section chiefs, an inspector, and an assistant director of FBI headquarters were censured for overall responsibility in this matter. In September of 64, as a result of the Warren Commission report, additional administrative action was imposed on 8 of the above-mentioned employees who were previously disciplined in 63. That disciplinary action is as follows. Number 1, the case agent in Dallas was censured, placed on probation, suspended for 30 days without pay for inadequate investigation, failure to interview Oswald's wife, delayed reporting, failure to place Oswald on the security index, and for holding investigation in abeyance after being in receipt of information that Oswald had been in contact with the Soviet embassy in Mexico City. It is noted this special agent was also transferred from Dallas to a non-preference office, which basically means a shithole office, September 28, 1964, and this was Special Agent James Hosty. Number 2, the supervisor of this matter in Dallas, Gordon Shanklin, was censured, placed on probation, and transferred for failing to ensure the case was more fully investigated and reported, for not placing Oswald on the security index, and for concurring in decision to hold the investigation in abeyance. He was also removed from his supervisory duties privately in April of 1964 as a result of his derelictions in the Oswald case. In addition to the above 8, 3 other employees who had not been disciplined as a result of the Oswald case were disciplined as below. Another special agent in Dallas was censured and placed on probation for failing to properly handle and supervise this matter in relationship to the submission of evidence to the Bureau. Number 2, an inspector at FBI headquarters was censured for not exercising sufficient imagination and foresight to initiate action to have the security index material disseminated to the Secret Service. Number 3, an assistant to the director at FBI was censured for his overall responsibility in this entire fucking matter. I mean, the FBI was coming down on motherfuckers. What? I mean, it goes on and on. Like this poor bastard. Another FBI headquarters supervisor was censured, placed on probation, removed from supervisory duty, demoted from a GS-14 to GS-13. That means he got a motherfucking pay cut and transferred to the field instead of behind the desk for failing to take action on a teletype advising of Oswald's contact with the Soviet embassy in Mexico City, failing to completely review the file, failing to instruct Field to press more vigorously after Oswald's contact with Soviet embassy in Mexico, and failure to have Oswald placed on a security index. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, they were dropping the hammer of the gods on these people for dropping the fucking ball and not doing their due diligence, folks, on Oswald and his wife. So do you think they were covering shit up? Oh, hell yeah. Inspector Gale telephonically advised at 10:45 a.m. on this date that he desired explanations from James Hosty and the supervisor, setting forth the reasons why a stop was not placed on Oswald's passport with the Department of State. Mr. Gale stated the Bureau did not know Oswald even had a passport, that he obtained one in June of 1963 on a 24-hour turnaround despite being a former defector. So there you go, folks. You haven't heard of it before, but they were certainly behind the scenes at the FBI. Hoover was shaking the trees and rattling some bones, because he realized how, if this stuff got out, that the implications of the assassination could be turned around and blamed on the FBI if they were deemed to be incompetent in their duties. So they did not take this shit lightly, folks. But what are you going to do? You can't fire them all, Edgar. You can't fire them all. All right, folks. That's it for another fantastic, titillating Lone Gunman podcast. Just for you. Episode 222. Deuce, deuce, deuce. When we can, into the satellite, down directly to your ears, folks. This is your boy. Until next time. Peace.
All that I can say in Black River, you are Here's the moment, brand new presents.